Welcome to the Juice Box with Juice Springsteen, covering the week that was in professional wrestling. Some might say that being the quarterback of an NFL team is the most pressured job in the world of sports. I will say that at this moment, Friday the 13th of October, being Tony Khan is the most pressured job in sports. AEW has been very successful since its launch in 2019. It's been steadily on Turner Networks and has had anywhere from 700 to 900,000 viewers on most weeks. The pay-per-view numbers have been very good, especially in a time where streaming is king. Even with all of AEW's successes, drama backstage, CM Punk, injuries, and some other issues have weighed down those positives. On most weeks, Dynamite is on Wednesday, uncontested. There have been a few circumstances where Dynamite went head-to-head with NXT. Except, on Tuesday, Dynamite went head-to-head with NXT, and NXT had John Cena, Cody Rhodes, Asuka, LA Knight, Paul Heyman, and The Undertaker, to prove a point on Tony Khan's birthday. Before the shows even began, a tweet war was waged, and the result was each show going commercial-free for the first half hour, a half-hour buy-in, and 10-minute overrun for Dynamite. Both shows were solid, and the viewing dynamic was fun as a fan. NXT got 921,000, and AEW got 609,000. Tony Khan was not happy about this, and he tweeted his frustration. He tweeted his frustration before, saying, "I have a message for them," saying that Vince McMahon has allegedly used his power and influence to shoot a lot of shots. And even after the show, Tony Khan said that 2 active decade-long rating streaks from 2 great legends were ended. With all due respect, AEW on TBS versus WWE on USA, neither John Cena nor Undertaker had ever been on a WWE show with under 1 million total viewers and under 400,000 in the demo. Some may call that petty. I call it passionate. But the fact still remains. WWE clearly loaded up their third show to prove a point, and no matter how Tony Khan responds, WWE is still number one. However, I give Tony Khan a ton of credit for fighting an almost impossible battle and never retreating, fighting for every single second of TV time. It's incredibly admirable, and I doubt the vast majority of fans of pro wrestling would even be able to handle the scrutiny and pressure that Tony Khan faces each week as they go forth. I'm not excusing his lack of bedside manner when it comes to tweeting at fans or other companies, and certainly not here to feel bad for TK. But I respect Tony Khan for fighting a fight that might never be won against the juggernaut that is WWE. Tony Khan was, is, and will always be a pro wrestling fan at the end of the day. And right or wrong, I love his passion for this business. What a week. What a week it has been for wrestling fans, pretty much anybody interested in pro wrestling these days had one hell of a week. This is the Juice Box. I am Juice Springsteen once again, as always, here to give my insights on the world of pro wrestling. We're going to do a little bit of everything today. We've talked a little bit already about Tony Khan and the chaos that was the Tuesday Night War this past Tuesday. We're going to discuss Fastlane, of course, and a big recap, as well as the Tuesday Night War recap of everything that ensued there, and then some other little news and notes before we head on out for this week on the Juice Box. I am Juice Springsteen, once again, at Juicy Steen on Twitter, at Juicy Wrestling Closet on Instagram, Apple Podcasts, on iTunes. If you can rate this 5 stars, that would be fantastic. Google Podcasts is also where you can find this show, juicysteen.podbean.com as well. I'd like to give a good thanks to Josh Eisenberg, who showed up last week for the Fastlane predictions show, which was really fun, a lot of fun. And we were kind of on with some of our predictions. Some weren't so much. Still no Damian Priest cash in, of course, but only so many things we can predict each month to get wrong. But I thought Fastlane was a good show. I caught some of it and enjoyed what I did see. But yeah, interesting week to say the least. We're going to get into Fastlane, like I said, and we'll get into the Tuesday Night Wars. Josh being on the show was great. He also showed up, and we watched the first hour or so of NXT versus Dynamite, which was really fun. We had two monitors going, watching and flipping between the two. Dynamite had 42 minutes, I believe, of commercial-free action, which was pretty awesome to see, as NXT had just under 30 minutes. They had 29 minutes of commercial-free action. But man, let's just get into Fastlane, and we'll kind of discuss certain things that happened after the fact. Not too much happened on Raw, but we also still have SmackDown later on tonight, as we now move forward to, I believe, Crown Jewel, and then of course Survivor Series in November. So yeah, let's get into what happened to Fastlane. Cody and Jey Uso, surprisingly to me, win the WWE Undisputed Tag Team titles from the Judgment Day. Finn Balor, Damian Priest. I thought this was a shoe-in for Damian Priest then cashing in the Money in the Bank later in the night. Spoiler alert, that did not happen. But I enjoy this, they do these teams of, well, can they coexist? And this not necessarily is similar to can they coexist, because Jey and Cody were kind of at odds, as the Bloodline and Cody had their battles leading up to WrestleMania last year in Los Angeles. And now it definitely seems like Cody and Jey are going to be on the right path, at least until potentially we get to the actual road to WrestleMania. But that won't be until the Royal Rumble in January. But yeah, I enjoyed the match. Cody and Jey, now the tag champs. They also successfully defended the titles on Raw against KO and Sami Zayn, which was pretty interesting. We had the Latino World Order, Santos, Escobar, Rey Mysterio, and Carlito. Sans original music, which I am not a fan of. Hopefully tonight on SmackDown we see Carlito coming out to his original entrance music, but he did not have that entrance music at the PLE. And although it was cool to see Carlito back in the ring, it's baffling that they don't just use the music that really, really solidified Carlito's character back when he was really, really at the top of his game back in the mid-2000s. But they get the win over the Street Profits and Bobby Lashley. Now, I mean, again, are we ever going to get some sort of change now? You know, will the Street Profits break away from Bobby? Will the Street Profits break up? Will Montez separate by himself? Will Dawkins separate by himself? What's Lashley going to do going forward? A lot of interesting ways they could go about it, but nothing too foreseen thus far after just one episode of Raw after the show, after Fastlane. Io Sky successfully defended her women's title against Charlotte and Asuka with a pinfall victory. Solid match as well. And Yeah, a lot of interesting things to talk about with the women's division. Considering on Raw, we had Nia Jackson, Raquel Rodriguez, which then ended in a no contest. Um, Rhea attacked both of them, and we might get a triple threat between them. Again, with Io Sky, of course, we'll probably see some more stuff happening on SmackDown tonight. But yeah, really good match, I thought. Interesting to see what they're going to play. I feel like Bailey's going to come back into the fray at some point here and get into the title picture once again, as Io Sky is still champion. Big tag match: Jimmy Uso and Solo Sikoa, the Bloodline, were defeated, excuse me, by the team of John Cena and LA Knight, two of the young upstarts on the NXT brand. I'm just kidding, but those two were on the show. Paul Heyman was on the show as well. LA Knight raises John Cena's hand, much like Cena did to LA Knight, and I'm really curious. I'm really curious to see what John Cena does at Crown Jewel. I'm looking forward to seeing what LA Knight does at Crown Jewel, and I'm really curious to see if they potentially have a match against each other at Crown Jewel. I think LA Knight, he had the entrance with the Slim Jim car in Indy. Big ovation as he has been getting. We'll see if they want to keep pushing forward with LA Knight. I'm not saying that he is not going to continue as a solo wrestler. Of course, this was just a little detour to, get the John Cena rub. But is LA Knight going to go after Roman Reigns? Is that next? Is he going to interfere and interrupt Roman Reigns coming back to the blue brand tonight? Again, without the knowledge of what happens tonight on SmackDown, I can't really make too many calls on that. But we will, of course, discuss more of that next week on the Juice Box. But yeah, fun match. I love the interactions of Cena and LA Knight, both getting huge reactions. And I'm interested to see, like I said, what Cena does, especially Crown Jewel potentially being the last show Cena does before, I would say, WrestleMania, if he does WrestleMania next year. But if Rock's at WrestleMania next year, I don't know if they need Cena. So Crown Jewel might be it for him, for Cena for a while. So we'll see what happens on, I believe, November 3rd in Jeddah. And then Seth freaking Rollins, once again, defeats Shinsuke Nakamura, last man standing, World Heavyweight title. Fantastic match. They were really all over the building here. A lot of good table spots. A lot of fun interactions throughout the arena. And no Damian Priest cash in. So that remains to be seen. But of course, as we now just kind of get into Raw a little bit here, Drew McIntyre seems to be the man to go after Seth Rollins next. Is Drew the guy? Is Drew the guy to take the title? I don't think he is. I think he could, and you could end up getting a Drew McIntyre versus Gunther one-on-one for the World Heavyweight title, but somehow I feel like they're not going to pull the trigger on that. I still think the money is in Seth Rollins and Gunther at WrestleMania. Excuse me a sec. Sorry, I just wanted to take a swig of my lemonade there. Didn't want to get all that on the mic. But yeah, I wouldn't hate it if Drew won the world title, but again, same with the bloodline of what happens next with the bloodline. Like who fights Roman after that? Does Roman fight anybody? Who's champion, and how does that go? I find a similar thought with the world title now that we got Seth. He's the first champion for this new world title. But once he's beaten, first of all, who's going to be the guy to beat him? And then what happens with that guy? Like, what are the plans with that other guy? And if it's Drew, I think Gunther is a play. I think a lot of options are in play with Drew being champion. But I also think that there's money to be made if Seth just holds the title until WrestleMania, gets that time off after, and then I would assume he lose. If he were to do that, he would lose to Gunther potentially at WrestleMania, which is what I think is going to happen, and that's what I would like to see happen. I think Gunther definitely is the guy to take the title from Seth, but I'm not the booker, so what the hell do I know? But yeah, Fastlane was a fun little PLE. Payback, Fastlane, fun shows. I really enjoyed that they're still kind of, going for it, even though they're not your traditional Big Five or, even a Saudi show, which is coming up. Because those have actually been pretty solid overall in the grand scheme of things. So I'm looking forward to Crown Jewel. I'm looking forward to Survivor Series, of course, because we're oh so very close to getting to the road to WrestleMania beginning in January. But Fastlane was good, and let's tackle what everybody probably wants to tackle, and that's the Tuesday Night War. Now, I did bring up quite a bit of points in my opening monologue there that we'll, of course, delve into a little bit here. So, of course, with the MLB playoffs, AEW was never going to run on Wednesday this past week, so they decided we're going to run on Tuesday. That was the slot that they were given, and it just so happened to be Tony Khan's birthday on 10/10. Not to be confused with the collect call service 10/10/220 that sponsored a plethora of WCW events in the past. There's a fun sidebar I bet you guys didn't think you'd hear in 2023. But so the show's announced, right? And all right, it's Dynamite versus NXT. Great, this will be fun. This will be an interesting ratings matchup. Can't wait to see what they kind of put on the shows. And it kind of all of a sudden, it really got accelerated. I don't know how else to say it. All within a 3 or 4 day span, we had an announcement of Carmelo Hayes versus Braun Breaker on NXT, right? But Carmelo Hayes was going to have John Cena in his corner. Braun Breaker was going to have Paul Heyman in his corner. Because Heyman and Cena had been kind of interacting with the Bloodline recently, of course. But really nothing. Braun and Paul Heyman really didn't have too much, in common. Outside of Hayes being potentially a huge star going forward, him and Cena really don't have much in common either. Asuka was announced to have a match at the show. Former NXT Women's Champion. The Brawling Brutes were announced to have a match at the show. And as this is happening, Tony Khan frequents on Twitter. He's frequently on there interacting with fans, and potentially to a detriment. Kind of laying it all out like, hey, this is Title Tuesday. This is what we're doing, just promoting in general. And then at the end of SmackDown, there's a promo for NXT. And at the end of that promo, a gong hit, and you knew that meant they're gonna put Undertaker on this show on NXT. And Asuka, I get. Oh, by the way, I didn't even mention Cody Rhodes is gonna be on NXT. Cody Rhodes is gonna make an announcement on NXT, not a match, So I'm thinking, and Becky Lynch is already NXT champion. Dom is North American champion. all these things have already happened. They've already been really building up the NXT brand to a higher level than potentially it's ever been outside of the Adam Cole Undisputed era. The Nakamura, Joe, Bobby Roode, DIY revival era that really, really put NXT on the map. Finn Balor, of course. So all these things are happening, and Tony Khan's it's all pretty friendly. Then the Taker thing happens, and it's like, man, here's the thing. A common theme online, especially in regards to this specific day, but just in general with AEW, quote unquote, versus WWE. And I'm going to use the terms that are really thrown around a lot, but the tribalism towards any one company with a disdain for the other or a proclivity to root for the other company to fail by fans. I get it. I understand. WCW and WWF never mixed words when it came down to it. WWE ran the Huckster and Nacho Man vignettes saying how old those stars had gotten and how WCW had them now, and what a joke that is. WCW would start their shows 3 minutes before Raw would and give away the results of Raw if it were taped. Like cutthroat stuff. But again, even to the detriment of WCW, when Tony Schiavone was told to say that Mankind was going to win the world title, that'll put some butts in the seats. And so many people did switch over to watch Raw January 4th, 1999. And although that wasn't the final nail in the coffin for WCW, it really, really did not help the company out, having such a just egg on their face for saying something's going to be terrible, and then that company goes out and dominates, So I get it. I get the disdain for other companies and rooting for a company to fail at the baseline. But at this juncture, when the internet is there, it's toxic, but it's there. You could put forth just as much positivity as fans do negatively towards either company. But it really, really is fascinating to me that at this point where WWE has had a stranglehold on North American wrestling since 2001, outside of TNA being around. I would never call TNA, now Impact Wrestling, a clear number 2. They were probably the second biggest company. They added Christian, Kurt Angle, Sting. They had AJ Styles. They had Hogan. They had Bischoff. They had Jeff Hardy. The list goes on and on. You can name how many talents went to Impact or TNA and stuck it out, right? But I still never really considered them number 2 like a legitimate competition. AEW coming into the picture in 2019, and it's finally some actual competition on a TV channel that people have. That was the other thing with TNA. It was always on Spike or FSN or all randomly in the middle of the afternoon, like weekly pay-per-views for $9.99. Like, this is a company. They're on the Turner Network just like WCW. They of course they're gonna pluck guys from WWE if they're available, or really from anywhere. To be fair, Which, that's another thing. I love when fans are like, "Oh man, WWE has so many guys that go to AEW, and wow, AEW just has all these WWE talent. Like wow, how unoriginal." AEW's been around for 4 years, right? Jade Cargill is now the first like all AEW talent to go to WWE. Cody was in WWE before, right? So, and like you can keep going back and forth. Like no one is just all one. Even Sting went to WWE, and Sting was like the most loyal WCW and then TNA guy you could ever have. But he did it. It's the place you want to go. It's not a slight on AEW. That's just what it is. WWE is the standard. WWE is Coke. It's Pepsi. It's the name brand. It's the one you think about. You say Coke or Pepsi, you know what it is. It's cola, but you don't say cola. You say Coke or you say Pepsi. You don't say a piece of a tissue for your nose. You say a Kleenex or a Band-Aid. Those are all brands. That's what WWE is. Oh, that wrestling stuff. That WWE. It's WWE. People say UFC when they refer to MMA all the time, but that's a company. There's other MMA companies, which is funny now that WWE and UFC are also one company. So what other guys do you want to come in? Like, there are only so much talent out there. So back to the hate of it all, now that AEW's here and they got all this talent and they've got pay-per-views that are getting big buys and they got a show on Turner and a few shows now and they just got Adam Copeland, formerly Edge, and all these things. It's finally some legitimate, I would consider, number 2 competition for WWE. Yet, we get this like, it has to be AEW, it has to be WWE. It can't be, I like both. And I'm saying that because I do like both. I like both. I can be critical of both. I can praise both. It's not that hard. There's so many wrestlers in WWE that I love to watch. So many wrestlers in AEW that I love to watch. If their stuff sucks, it sucks. I'm going to say it sucks, and I'm going to tell you why I think it sucks and how they could potentially do it better. Just because it sucks doesn't mean it's going to suck forever. Just because it's great doesn't mean it's going to sustain that forever. If it's great, I'm going to say it's great. I'm not going to BS anybody on this, especially on this show. This is the Juice Box, and I'm Juice Springsteen. This is what I do. So it's not that I'm just tired of people going, oh, it's gotta be NXT, it's gotta be Dynamite. Pick a side. Like, we are winning. Both of these companies, we're winning because we get to see. You know how fun it was having Josh Eisenberg over, and we're flipping on both at the same time at 8:00. We have volume up on one, muting on the other, but then the other one seems like they're gonna have a match, so we want to hear what that they have to say. And we're going back and forth. And I'm old enough to remember where we would flip back and forth between Raw and Nitro. Even at points where we were a WCW family, we would watch Nitro and tape Raw. But those are some of the most fond times I have as a wrestling fan. So for people to, wrestling fans, that's the thing. You want to call yourselves pro wrestling fans. Yet, you're not a fan of all of pro wrestling. And I'm not talking GCW, or any deathmatch wrestling or some other wrestling that you don't prefer because it's not your cup of tea. Even so, that's still pro wrestling, but pro wrestling is subjective. It's like music. It's like any form of entertainment. It's like a movie. You like what you like. You don't like what you don't like. You choose not to watch what you don't want to watch. And that's it. It's not that hard. So, for people to root against Dynamite or root against NXT, I find it silly. I can say good things about one, bad things about the other, but still say, yeah, but, there's still this. I'm going to come out of this giving you the truth. I pride myself with my journalism degree that I legitimately have, not a kayfabe one, that I can be very unbiased. I can be opinionated, but I can also have an unbiasedness to where I'm going to tell you how it is, for instance, if I really loved something, and it was terrible, I'm going to tell you 1,000% it was terrible, and I'm disappointed that it was terrible, But if it was good before, and I think it could be good after, I'm going to say those things as well. I'm going to be as forthcoming and honest as I can be. There's no sense in me lying and saying, oh, it's all terrible. They're going down the tubes. That's clickbait. That's not what I believe in. That's not what people, fans of a product or of a business would do. Fans would stick with whatever and still be critical. Just because you're critical doesn't mean you're dumping it off on the side of the road like a Christmas tree after the 25th. So, Tuesday night happens. I enjoyed both shows, but here's some of my thoughts, honestly. I thought NXT was a good show. I thought Dynamite was a good show. I thought overall the MJF stuff worked. It might have gone on too long. Unfortunately, Moxley couldn't wrestle, so Orange Cassidy stepped in. He won the title over Rey Fenix, the international title. Jay White and Adam Page was a good match. Danielson and Swerve was a fantastic match. We had Tony Storm doing silent movie stuff during the picture-in-picture for commercials, which was incredible. And of course, Adam Copeland finished the night against Luchasaurus, which was okay. And there was a big schmoz at the end, which, as a fan of WCW, I could tell you that WCW did that all the time. And sometimes it was very exciting. Sometimes it just feels like you're throwing together a lot of talent in there to conjure up excitement that might not be there or feel organic. So, kind of dull on that. Let's flip it to NXT. I thought Carmelo and Braun was fun. I thought the Brutes brawl, the pub brawl, whatever it was good. I thought that was fun. Asuka had a dominant performance. Jade Cargill met with Shawn Michaels for a moment. I thought the show was interesting. Cody talked for too long, and of course his announcement was just the Dusty Rhodes Invitational, the tag team tournament, of course. And he also announced that someone that wasn't announced for the show, another SmackDown superstar, LA Knight, was going to be the special referee for Ilya Dragunov, and I believe it was it Corbin? I want to make sure I get that all correct, because I'm pretty sure they had a title match. Just want to make sure here we get that all set forth here. But oh no, it was against Dom Mysterio. What am I talking about? Baron Corbin was involved earlier in the night. I'm getting some of the stuff confused because, again, the other thing was they made the Carmelo Braun match a match where whoever wins gets then inserted into a triple threat, which I think is then number one contender. So they came up with stakes on the night of. So that's okay, but again, seemed shoehorned, and both nights were great, or both shows, right? I enjoyed both shows pretty much the whole thing. Some stuff was whatever and meh, but I had such a fun time watching both. If I have to pick one thing that I was just like, this is unnecessary at the very least, the end of the show, Braun Breaker's out there, you hear the gong, oh boy, here comes Undertaker, but it's the American Badass Undertaker. And look, I thought John Cena coming out and the whole crowd singing his song, because there's only like 1,000 people in that audience, and it being an intimate audience, and seeing Cody and all these things happening for such a small crowd was awesome, right? But to see the Undertaker, the American Badass Undertaker, which, I mean, for how long do we always want that character to come back, right? But for a 58-year-old Undertaker to come out on his motorcycle at the end of NXT to, I'm just going to say, bury Braun Breaker, because Braun Breaker didn't get any offense in and got choke slammed. And then Taker then said, there's only one badass and you just met the biggest badass. Is Braun Breaker going to get his revenge? Is The Undertaker going to get his comeuppance next week? No. John Cena's not going to be on NXT next week. Cody probably won't be on there next week. LA Knight, Asuka, they probably won't be on there next week. Pretty sure Undertaker's not going to show up next week on NXT either. So I ignored Heyman because there was a video of Paul Heyman talking to The Rock's daughter. So we have some bloodline stuff cooking if you smell what Paul's cooking. So that's fascinating. But outside of him, are any of those guys or girls going to show up next week on NXT? Probably not. So that leads me to this. And I really don't want to get too deep into all this stuff. We could go on for a long time. I know Tony Khan was brash. I know it was his birthday, and what better present to give Tony Khan than to give a dose of reality of why WWE is better than AEW. If that's how you want to view it. But I kind of view it as, it's been rumored that SmackDown might be moving to Tuesdays. There's a rumor today that Raw could eventually go off of Mondays to another day, which would be fascinating and kind of sad to see that happen. It's a staple for so long, but I understand. Things change. People move forward. So potentially, NXT, in theory, could go back to Wednesday nights. And if it were, and it starts going head-to-head again with Dynamite, you might see some really, really strong cards put forth by both Dynamite and NXT like we did on Tuesday. But I doubt you're going to see the guys and girls, the legends that they put on NXT again. Especially not every week. So I think that just as people will say that, and I can agree, that Tony Khan was being incredibly petty on Twitter, going after Sean and Hunter and Vince, although warranted potentially for all of them, as well as just praising AEW and just pushing his show and product as an owner of a company should and would aptly to, promote your product. I think it's just as petty for Vince, Sean, Hunter, WWE, NXT to put forth a show that honestly has unrealistic expectations to ever happen again. Unless, again, they pull out all the stops for the rest of NXT's time. I doubt it. So I don't think there's really anybody in the wrong here. Tony Khan was incredibly petty. I think WWE was incredibly petty for different reasons, but kind of for all the same reasons. You want to be the best. So as petty as either of those companies and guys could be, I'm really happy that it did happen. I'm a wrestling fan. I want both companies to succeed. When AEW does great, that means WWE's going to have to step it up. If WWE starts hitting some strides, AEW's going to have to start picking up the pace. That's great. That's competition. That's what pro wrestling is supposed to emulate. Real life competition under the guise of kayfabe. So why wouldn't I like NXT, Raw, SmackDown versus Dynamite, Collision, Rampage? That's competition too. I just want both to do great. How many times you see shirts that's like, I just want everybody to play well. I just want everybody to do well. And that's not necessarily a participation trophy either. You can be terrible, but still put forth some show, and something will be good, I'm sure. Wrestling's a buffet. Eric Bischoff has said that quite a few times. Not everything's going to be for everybody, but a lot of stuff will hit. So, just in general, I had a great time with Tuesday night. I thought it was fantastic. It was just so nice to have the going back and forth on shows when it really felt like it mattered. And that's where the pettiness is a good thing. NXT was like, we're going to put John Cena and Cody and Undertaker and Asuka and LA Knight unannounced and Paul Heyman, And Tony Khan said, F that, it's my birthday. We're going to do, 30 minutes of commercial free. We're going to do a 10-minute overrun. We're going to have a buy-in. We're going to have Adam Copeland's first AEW match. I loved it. So I think it's better for everybody, and I'm thrilled that it happened. And here's to seeing what happens in the future. But that was clearly the big discussion this week, and I'm glad to finally kind of discuss it in a forum where I won't just immediately get downvoted. However, who knows at this juncture. But let's just cover a couple more topics here real quick before we sign off for this week. Let's get into it here. The trailer for the Iron Claw, the Von Erich movie produced by A24, released. The trailer for that was released the other day. Damn, it looks fascinating. It looks so good. A24 is a company that produces a lot of great movies over the last probably 10 or so years. Some highlights specifically for me: Hereditary, Midsummer, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. That's just to name like three. You know, like there's so many. I mean, Spring Breakers was A24. Talk to Me. So many A24 productions. They really, really do a great job with what they are tasked with. And this is a movie I feel like that's going to capture the pro wrestling spirit, the triumphs and tragedies of a family in the pro wrestling business. And, you know, if you know the story, you're going to want to watch it to see how it unfolds with these specific actors and how they kind of portray that. If you really don't know or you're unfamiliar, you better bring a box of tissues. It's going to be a rough go. But the trailer looked amazing. I'm thrilled for it to finally come out. I think it's going to come out later on this year. And if I do see that film, the review will be up on in the juice box here after I do see it. So that looks great. Can't wait to see that. I do believe MJF is in there as Lance Von Erich. I know Zac Efron's in there as well. So a lot of good stuff. Can't wait to see how that turns out. But a lot of good praise for that so far in the wrestling fan circles. NXT also, I didn't mention this. The Brian Pillman, or now known as Lexis King, vignette, which, you know, a lot of people were critical of, you know, Gunther's name change from Walter, and I mean, how many name changes over the course of time? Pac to Neville, losing first names, Cesaro, Rusev, did we have to endure? But now we're getting Brian Pillman Jr. from AEW. Now it's going to be called Lexis King as tributes to some family members, I believe, some sister, or maybe two sisters, as a matter of fact. And in this most recent vignette, he talks about how, you know, his father, his father might not be there anymore, and there was like it's tough to, you know, move forward with all this, like using his father's legacy to now build his own, not be in the shadow of his father. You know, he wants to kind of leave his own legacy while highlighting his own hatred of his father's legacy. He probably respects it, but his father's legacy is what makes it tough for himself to succeed. So I think it was a fascinating promo. I love the look, because that's the thing. You want to be Brian Pillman, right? Without being called Brian Pillman. And I think Lexis King, a new name, a new attitude, but a similar look to the loose cannon Brian Pillman, I think is going to work wonders. I think it was tough for Brian Pillman Jr. to survive in AEW as Brian Pillman Jr. I mean, the name is so tough and recognizable that it's going to be very difficult to move forward out of that and carve your own legacy. So you get the name change, and I'm sure people are going to hate it, but it's real, it's true, and I think it's a great name for those reasons. And I think that now he can move past the name and forge his own way in NXT. So looking forward to Lexis King in NXT. And lastly, someone who was not at AEW, not at NXT, but was at the Pens Blackhawks game on Tuesday night as both Dynamite and NXT were happening, was CM Punk. Yes, he was in Pittsburgh, and of course I did not see him. I did not go to the game. I was watching wrestling. But, and this is from House of Wrestling, Nick Hausman. Interacted with him a few times, a couple of WrestleManias that I did go to. A great guy, kind of doing his own thing now. A vast network of talent over there at House of Wrestling. Shout out to him. But he tweeted out this, that a WWE source close to... sorry, I'm reading something else. I will mention that as well. But a source close to the Punk camp mentioned that, you know, he's kind of happy that he is out of AEW, seeing the chaos of the Tony Khan tweets over the last 24 hours, which I think is probably better. I'm sure those types of things were happening. It's tough to have one guy that's kind of going off the rails, let alone two, especially if one's a wrestler and one's the owner of the company. So I could see where Punk probably is thrilled about that. But yeah, just bizarre. I don't know if CM Punk's going to do wrestling ever again. It's been reported he might not even... He wanted to go to WWE, but they were like, nah, we're not doing it. But the week before they said they were talking to him, so who knows? Potentially it's Survivor Series. He'll just show up in Chicago, so who really, really knows? It'll all be fascinating. I'm sure we're all tuned into that. But, yeah, and here's just this one last point here before we sign off. This was another quote, I believe, from House of Wrestling, but this was before NXT and Dynamite went head-to-head. That a WWE source close to NXT this morning said that Tuesday night was going to be, quote, a very clear example of how and why WWE is WWE and why AEW has a long way to go. End quote. And then they also said that they felt AEW had been lulled into a false sense of reality, that they were somehow an industry leader by continuing to be WWE's number 3 brand in viewership. And again, it's the comments like that, where a false sense of reality that they were somehow an industry leader. You can be an industry leader and not be the leader. You know, AEW is a nice, pretty secure place to work now that's an alternative to WWE and comparable with the pay for WWE. Whether you want to call them industry leader or not, I don't think there's just one industry leader. I think there's one that's a monopoly that's dominant for the past 20 years, and that's WWE. Like I said, Pepsi, Coke, WWE, Kleenex, Band-Aids. But it doesn't mean AEW can't be that 1A and provide comparable stuff, money, TV time, exposure, and an ability to get yourself really, truly over, and then go to WWE if you really want to, or go somewhere else and have freedoms and just hone your craft and be the best pro wrestler you can be. So who cares, you know? And it's also funny that you're acknowledging as WWE that NXT is the 3rd brand, yet you're putting Cena and Undertaker and Cody and LA Knight and Asuka and Paul Heyman on the show for what? To beat a non-industry leader, you know? It's all fun. It's all great to talk about. I think I've made some points, though. Hopefully they stick. Look, I'm a fan of AEW. I'm a fan of WWE. I was a fan of WCW and WWE. WCW went away, you know, so AEW has filled that void. And I'm always going to love WWE. Like, it's just stupid to really pick sides and, like, stick to it. This is not the NFL where you pick a team and you got to hate their rival and the other teams are meh. And the Super Bowl is 2 teams, and if you don't like the team, you're not even going to watch it. It's 2 teams that whatever. I love all wrestling. And when WrestleMania happens, I want to watch all the matches because I'm invested in all the characters, not one character, and it's live or die, and that's it. That's insane. This is supposed to be fun. It's sports entertainment, and we are all just trying to be entertained. This has been the Juice Box. I'm Juice Springsteen. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this show and my long-winded rants on AEW and NXT. It was a fun show for me, and as always, next week we'll get right back to it with some more stuff with happening on SmackDown, Raw. Hopefully some more stuff got furthered as we get closer to Crown Jewel. And, of course, the following week or two, I believe, is Full Gear for AEW. So that's their next actual pay-per-view. And, of course, the following week is Survivor Series. And I think a weekend in between all that, I'm going to go to the Undertaker One Dead Man show, which will be fun as well. So a lot of cool stuff happening this fall. We will get in depth with all that stuff as we get closer to each of those. But, yeah, fun week of pro wrestling. If you're a fan, and if you're a fan, you're listening to this show, that's what this show's for. It's for the fans. And that's what all wrestling should be for, the fans at the end of the day, because all wrestlers now were fans before. And whether they're fans now, they're always going to be fans, just like I will be. Hopefully you are too. Hopefully you're a fan of the Juice Box. Juicy Steen on Twitter, Juicy Wrestling Closet on Instagram. Tune in each and every week. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, juicysteen.podbean.com, and rate this 5 straws on iTunes. That would really, really help me out. So until next week, I'm Juice Springsteen, and thank you for listening to another episode of The Juice Box. That was The Juice Box with Juice Springsteen. Make sure to subscribe to The Juice Box wherever you listen to podcasts.